Welcome to Behind the Scenes with Music in the Spoken Word. I'm Derrick Porter, and today we have a very special guest, Big T Thurl Bailey, a greeter with music and the spoken word. Thurl, welcome. We are so glad to have you in the studio this morning.
Thanks, Derrick. Be careful what you ask for, because I'm an open book, man. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, I couldn't sleep last night. I was so excited, and let me tell you why. About 10:30, I decided to turn on ESPN 30 for 30.
Yes.
Advance and
Survive.
Survive and Advance. And I watched that for 90 minutes. And by the time I got done watching the end, I couldn't sleep because I was so jazzed up. What an incredible ride. What an incredible journey. We'll find time to talk about that as well.
Okay.
But I look back, I'm so thankful to be counted your friend. And we've been able to know each other for a year and a half or so now, working together. And you have had this most incredible career, not only on the basketball court, but also in music. Now as part of Music in the Spoken Word, as an entrepreneur, as a consultant, as a strategic coach, as a broadcaster, so many different titles. And so when people might ask you, who is Thurl Bailey? How would you introduce yourself to someone who's never heard of you or never met you?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Hi, I'm Thurl Bailey. I'm jack of all trades, master of none. No, I'm kidding. No, introducing myself, I think I would just say, I'm someone who, from as far back as I can remember, I've always had an interest in trying and doing things. And in that journey, trying to find my passion. And I'm passionate about a lot of things, Derrick. And so in this life of ours, why not give it a shot? So that's me. I'm a guy who tries to live outside of his comfort zone. And I try to teach that as well. But if you get to know me, I'm a friend. I'm a servant. I love people. I love journeys. I love talking about them. Not necessarily my own, but I love finding out about other people's journeys. And so I'm a family man. I'm a husband, I'm a father. I'm not so unlike a lot of people.
Well, it's certainly been my experience as I've watched you in your calling as a greeter for Music in the Spoken Word. And the title of that really is get up on the stage and talk and greet the people. But I've seen you take it to a new level time and time again. You're a fairly recognizable person here in Salt Lake City. One, because of so many years of the Utah Jazz. Two, because you are 2 or 3 heads above the rest in many different ways. But I watch you go out into the crowds of people, both before and after, to shake hands, to high five, to take pictures, to say hello to these people. Tell us what this calling of being associated with Music in the Spoken Word has done for you on the inside. The things that nobody else can see or hear, what does it do for you on the inside?
Well, first of all, it's an amazing calling. When the calling first came, and we met with President Levitt, I met with President Levitt. It was a little nerve-wracking because I didn't really know what was in store. I didn't know, what I was going to be asked to do. And he quickly put me at ease. Just with the way he is with all of us, right? And I've known him for years. And this is probably, and this calling stretch is probably the most time I've really had to get to know President Levitt. And what a great man he is, what a great soul he has, and how he cares for everybody. So I was a little nervous, but he kind of, he really broke that wall down initially. And then I got really excited. Because everyone knows of the Tabernacle Choir at Temple Square. They know their history. I knew much of that, but I had never been directly associated with those amazing musicians, along with the orchestra. So it was going to be an education for me, first off. And so when my duties were explained to me, I'm like, hey, I could do that. So I kind of fell right into it. Just after a couple of tries, it's like anything, like even basketball. I used to get nervous before every game until the jump ball went up. And then I was kind of settled into my role. So it's kind of similar to that. But it's been an amazing experience for me and my wife and my family to have me a part of the choir organization. And then to get to meet you and to be able to come out and pretty much introduce you on the Sundays that I'm there. And of course, there's 3 or 4 of us that rotate on Sundays. But I think internally, what it has really done for me is give me just an amazing understanding of what those musicians have to go through to be a part of the choir and the orchestra. It's not like, what people think auditioning for a band or a choir or orchestra. I mean, it's amazing the journey they have to go through to even be considered. And so when I get a chance to listen to them now and I see them with a different lens, because I understand what they've gone through. And then the people that come in that I greet get to enjoy that. They get to learn more about that from me and from you and from the choir as they perform and record. So it's changed me. I mean, I had a great appreciation for music before, because music's always been a part of my life. But now that I'm immersed in it, not just on Sundays, but now when I turn on music and the spoken word, when I can't be there, I do that with a different type of lens and a different type of ear, if you will. And then I had a chance to attend one of the rehearsals and sit up there at the top with the basses, and it was just fantastic. So I've really enjoyed it. It's really given me just a greater appreciation overall of music, but also helped me understand the importance of, if you're passionate about something as they are, that destination was pretty much their dream, and they had to go through certain things. They had to make choices to be able to get there, maybe even sacrifice some things. So a lot of stories there. I get to pull some of those out of a lot of the members. So it's been fantastic.
Yeah. You talked about your early years of growing up and how music has been a part of your life.
Yes.
You grew up in Washington, D.C., in Maryland. What was your early family life like, and what were some of the influences on young Thurl that helped you become the Thurl Bailey that we all know and love today?
Influences. Well, that's exactly kind of what guides us, right? I have to go back before I was born, because my mom and dad, Retha and Carl, lived in North Carolina, and in the hot summers they were sharecroppers. They picked tobacco in the hot summer sun for very little money, barely enough to feed the family. I had my older brother and sister, and about that time in 1961, my mom was pregnant with me. And so, of course, I learned all this when I was old enough to know some of my family's history, but they pretty much sacrificed it all. They knew that they couldn't survive. The family could not survive on what they were doing as work in the tobacco fields in the Jim Crow South for very little money as African Americans. And so they took a risk. They took a risk and packed everything up and said, we're going to move north. I think there's maybe some better opportunities in D.C. My dad had some relatives there, and so they just packed everything up. I know it sounds like a African American version of the Beverly Hillbillies, but it was kind of close to that. But they packed it all up, and my mom found a job scrubbing floors for rich white people, and my dad was a carpenter, and he would do odd jobs here and there. But my mom's goal was to be a nurse someday. She wanted to go back to school and become a registered nurse. And so when I was born in 1961, my Uncle Thurl had just passed away. And I never got to meet him or got to know him, but my mom and dad just cherished him. It was my dad's brother, so they named me after him. So his death and my birth just kind of coincided, and that's where I got my namesake. But it wasn't, I mean, we moved to Maryland not too long after I was born in Prince George's County, which probably still to this day has one of the highest crime rates of any county per capita in the United States. So it wasn't easy. I was very fortunate because I had my dad, for the most part, was home with us, and my mom. I had both parents, and a lot of kids, a lot of friends of mine, a lot of kids I did know some didn't have either parent. They were raised by the village, their aunt or their grandma. Some had only one parent, dad, mostly their mom. So it was a crime-ridden area, and my mom and dad made a point of protecting us, trying to shield us from a lot of what was going on in the outside world, and not just gangs and the trouble we could get into, but the civil rights movement was in full force. And so my mom and dad were active protesters. So they would go at certain events. They attended Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech.
Wow.
We were too young to go. They didn't want us in that crowd, so we had a babysitter, and they went. And they were such great educators, Derrick, because they would come back and they would sit us down at a certain time of the day, and they would talk to us about the experience. They would talk to us about why they went and who Dr. Martin Luther King was. That was my history. My history teachers were my parents, because they weren't teaching that in schools. We were, when desegregation happened, I think Maryland was one of the last states to really abide by the law at that time. They were kind of late to the game. But if you ever watched Remember the Titans, that's how our schools were. We would go to school, we would be bused into white schools, and there would be picket signs from white parents with all kinds of stuff on it, and fights every other day. And so that's kind of the environment I grew up in. But I think what really, all those things shaped me, just having the knowledge of what era I was living in and how important it was to my parents that their kids focus on their education. We weren't allowed to bring C's or below home. My mom was stern about it, and Retha didn't play. Let me tell you something. Retha didn't mess around. She set us down. She says, I don't ever want to see a C or below on any of your report cards. And, as a young kid, I'm like, well, I didn't say this to her, but in my mind, like, a C is like passing. She's like, no, C is average, and I don't raise average kids in this house. So you better not come home with a C or below, because your education is going to be the way that you're going to be successful, and I want you to get a good one. So the rules were laid down. The law was laid down by my parents, and we couldn't be average. And so that's how we thought. Whatever we did, we weren't going to be average at it. And if you hear that enough, if you practice that enough, again, my parents were great teachers. They always talked about ask the right questions to the right people. You don't get the answer you want, find someone else to ask until you get your answer. And so that's the environment that we were raised in as kids, and it was either going to stick or not. There were a lot of influences, maybe not as much as today, but there were a lot of influences out there that could have taken us away, and we could have gotten caught up into what some of my friends and guys I knew, they proclaimed as their other family. They would gravitate towards crime and gravitate towards things that they knew would get them in trouble. But those are the things that really shaped me, that early life and the expectations from my parents of their kids.
I can see this in my mind's eye.
You see Retha, can't you?
Absolutely, and I'm scared.
I was too.
I can see in my mind's eye these two opposing forces, these life on the city streets. You didn't grow up on the streets, but you were walking those streets to school. Yep. They were in the neighborhood. These were your friends in many instances. And yet this profound love, respect, trust, confidence, high expectations, high support that came from this culture, this family culture that mom and dad created that helped Thurl become who he would become. And I just last night in watching again this ESPN special, going back in my mind to that UNLV game when you've got this opposing player who says, maybe some disparaging remarks and he's not worried about you, and you decided to take it in a way that I think it sounds to me like you were raised to handle that in, which is I'm not going to strike back. I'm going to go out and do my best, and I'm not going to be average. I'm not going to deliver a C grade performance for this game. And that was a standout game in so many ways.
It was, but I was going to strike back. I just wasn't going to do it in the way most people thought I was going to. Because if you're an athlete, well, if you're anybody, and someone says something disparaging, and maybe it wasn't so much disparaging as much as it was his opinion of me. I couldn't blame him. He was a great player, Sidney Green. I still see Sidney today, and I never bring up the game.
Sure.
But those are things that if they don't get to you, then there's just something that you need to do to fix that. Because I think if you're competitive, if you're in a competitive environment, you want to perform to the best of your ability, and sometimes you need a motivator. And that was mine. Yeah. And I think my teammates were a little bit surprised that I didn't go back at him in the media.
Yeah.
I just gave him all the accolades because he deserved them. Yeah. He was a great player. And that was my approach. Yeah. But nobody really knew, even my own teammates, nobody really knew internally that the water was about to boil. And I knew that potentially my defining moment as an individual athlete was about that game right there. Yeah. And we had won a lot of games. I knew we were going to win. We were going to go as far as we could go in the tournament. But I knew that night, because of what was said, that I had to respond in my own way. Yeah. And it just so happened that what really did it was hard work. Yeah, I knew I was a comparable player, and I knew what role I played on my team. But in a game with so much going on, you don't know. I mean, their defense could be out of this world. I could be missing shots. But there's something internally, I think, that clicks in, that maybe even unconscious, that understands that I have to bring more than I ever have because of it. And I called it poetic justice because the winning bucket, the tip-in shot, was in my hands. That shot could have missed.
Against that
guy.
Opponent.
Yeah. And so how often does that happen, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was a defining moment, I think, in my life, in my basketball career.
And it's now inspired. It's inspired millions of more people, too, in watching a very humane process and learning how to deal with these things, with these conflicts when it's arise, and that Words are important, but actions are even more important. And you showed that day on the basketball court. You were raised Baptist.
I was.
And later baptized a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints on a most interesting journey, including time alone in Italy of connecting with God. And I remember sitting down with you in a Sky Club in Atlanta, Georgia on a layover and hearing this story. Could you just share with us what led you on that path of faith? I know it was there, it was already there, but what led you on that path? And were there any, how has that faith sustained you through the challenges that have inevitably come between 1995 and today?
Well, I think initially, obviously faith is something that you can't see, but you have a commitment to, you believe. And I think I had that as far back as I can remember. My parents were not regular churchgoers, but every Sunday they put change in our pockets, sent us out the door, and we walked up the hill to the Baptist church for Sunday school. And they would go some Sundays, but we went every Sunday. And I loved it. I loved it. I think it was because I loved learning. I loved learning about people, about new things. And I especially loved talking about this man they called Jesus Christ. And I remember having questions. I remember raising my hand as a kid. I remember answering questions when they were asked, even if they ended up not being correct. I wanted to know more. I wanted to learn. And so I used to go with my parents to church when they would go as well, and I would sit there with them and just be really enamored, really enthralled, really taken by everything. The choir's songs and rhythm and harmonizations. Didn't think there's nothing more beautiful than that. And I would also get really excited when the pastor would start his sermon. And it wasn't so much about his sermon, it was more that I knew if I looked on the front rows of the pew, I would see older people. First, they'd be sitting there and listening, and as the preacher got more into his sermon, they were moved. They were standing up. They were amen. They were hallelujah, Jesus. And I wanted to know why they were doing that. I asked my parents. I said, Mom, Dad, what are they doing? And I'm paraphrasing the answer, but they would just tell me that, son, they're getting the Holy Ghost. And it looked so cool to me as a kid. I wanted it, and I came to the belief that I would have to wait. My parents didn't tell me this, but I just came to the belief because of who I was watching that I would have to be older. I have to be their age to be able to do that and feel that. So I think the foundation, my Baptist upbringing foundation, was amazing and marvelous. And I'm so proud and I'm so glad that I had that education. And I had that experience with my family and with my church at that time to kind of dig some roots into my spiritual self, my spiritual background. And so that's where it started. But as I got older and as I went to college Derrick, I always felt like there was more. I always felt like I was on this journey to figure out exactly who I needed to be, with Christ at the center, where I needed to go, who I needed to be, and so, I would go to like Campus Crusade for Christ, and that was wonderful as well, and go to non-denominational churches, and enjoy them all. I enjoyed parts of all of them, and not to get into a 20-minute fireside here, but long story short, that journey took me places. And I think it was my spiritual journey along with my basketball journey. Because it's my basketball, the beauty of my basketball journey is the fact that you look at this orange sphere, and to most people it's just a basketball, but to me it was a powerful tool. I got my education paid for that my parents couldn't afford, because I decided that I had a passion for it, and other people decided that I had potential. And so it took me places. At the end of college, it brought me out to Utah. I was drafted by them, 7th pick in the first round. So excited to be in the NBA. It was just, didn't care where I was going. I didn't know much about Utah at all. I had only been through it once during the NCAA tournament. Got here with Utah, and I read a little bit about the culture, and I heard some things about, let's just say it like it is. I heard things about Mormons that were being said. So that's all the education I had when I landed here, that I was going to be around a lot of white people. Culturally, that's not what I was used to. So was it a culture shock? It was sort of one, because we're all comfortable culturally with things, and that's where I grew up, and that's what I knew. But the beauty of that is my parents taught us how to, even in the midst of the civil rights movement, they taught us how to see through color and to see the hearts of people. So that was a part of me. It wasn't something I had to work on. That was my primary approach, my initial approach to meeting anybody. And so when I got to Utah, I felt really comfortable. People were nice to me, and I remember going to a lot of functions, and they would, jazz functions, and at the end of it, they would give me these gifts. They would have them wrapped up, and I'd go home and unwrap them, and I had like 50 Book of Mormons at home. And they would always write something right on the inside and sign their name, and I joke, but I'm not really joking, that I was getting more autographs than I was giving at that time. So, that was kind of my introduction to the LDS culture. I ended up gravitating, a lot of my friends that I gravitated towards, because you kind of gravitate towards people that you have similarities with, people that have some of the same characteristics that you have, the kindness, the service aspect. And so that was really my initial journey into the LDS culture, and of course years later, through influences and through my own prayer and study along that journey that I mentioned earlier, I truly found what I felt like was the true gospel. And it didn't go without questions, but I had questions that no man could answer. So I realized, as my mom and dad used to tell me, ask the right questions to the right people. I had to go down on my knees and ask my Lord and Savior for clarity, for answers, for direction. And I found that. I found it. And in 1995, of all places, not in Utah, in Milan, Italy, I was baptized, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
You know, as I picture that beautiful trail, journey, climb that you took to get there, and then I think back about this 1983 run to the NCAA championship, and it was a fight. Every single game was a fight, and it was down to the last 3 or 4 seconds, and it took unconventional thinking and coaching from Coach V.
Yeah.
Risks.
Yep.
And yet you prevailed all the way through when you never technically should have been able to be there. And as you contrast 1983, huge underdog victory, as you contrast your journey to finding in your words and our collective words the true gospel of Jesus Christ and your Lord, your Savior, Jesus Christ, what parallels do you draw there about the value of the fight?
Well, there's a lot of value in that fight, because even within the fight, there's defeat. And there are a lot of people that once they're defeated, it takes them a while. They can't, it's tough for them to handle, because the ability to get back up and try again is kind of overwhelmed by the pain that you feel, because failure is pain. To what degree, it depends on your passion for it or how much you want it. And there's a lot of parallels there. I mean, obviously, with the championship, it started with each individual journey. Each one of us who was on that team, not just the players, the trainers, the doctors, the equipment manager, the walk-ons, we all serendipitously, in some way, ended up together at that moment, at that point. And Coach Valvano is not the guy who brought me to that school. It was another coach, Coach Norm Sloan. So we all did, put our trust, and our parents did, in this man who came to our house and said, "We want your son to come play. We're going to take care of him." And then he leaves after my freshman year. He just picks up and goes to Florida. So now what are we supposed to do? I was going to go home. Everybody else was trying to decide whether they were going to go follow him or stay. And I knew I was going to go home, because I lost faith in the school, the coach. And I called my mom. I said, "Mom, Coach Sloan is gone. He said he was going to be here, and he's gone. I'm coming home." I told you about Retha. Retha said to me, "Son, you may be going somewhere, but you definitely ain't coming here." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She said, "You went there to get an education. That's what you're going to get. Whether you get it there or somewhere else, you're not going to get it here. So you're going to stay and wait and be patient." So I say that to say that there's a lot of things that are out of our control. But for the most part, we get to choose. We have choices in our life that take us in certain directions. We don't know where they're going to lead to. We just feel like we're making the best choice, hopefully possible for us, with others' help and encouragement. So my parallel really comes with the fact that it starts with an individual journey based on what you're passionate about, based on who you are, based on who you're not. And I just believe that the journey is the beauty of it all. I really do. Even the failure, because what I've learned in those pit moments, what I call those pit moments, those deep moments where failure hits you and it's painful and you cry because you got cut from the team and it's the worst thing in the world for you as a young player, to, okay, what now? Where do I go now? And I say cut from the team because in the 7th and 8th grade, at 6'7" and 6'9", my junior high school coach cut me. And it was the most painful thing I had ever experienced, Derrick, at that age, that young age, as a young teen. And the second time he cut me, he told me, he came out of his office and said that basketball wasn't for me and I was wasting his time and he didn't have time to teach me how to play. Why did he cut me? I was bad. I wasn't very good at all. I could hardly walk and chew gum at the same time. So he told me not to come back my last year because I'd be wasting my time and his. So I hadn't planned on going back my 9th grade year. He cut me in 7th and 8th. And then he took a job at another school the next year. They hired a new coach at my junior high school, and I had to decide. I had to make a choice of whether I was going to go back in that gym and try out one more time and fail a third time. And I decided to go back. And I think probably because part of me didn't want to cut myself. If I didn't show up, if I didn't walk through the door, then I was cutting myself, right? If I wasn't going to be on this team, it wasn't going to be because I didn't show up. And I remember this very important part of my life, and I'll bring the parallel back to you right here, is I made the team that year. I was probably the worst guy. There was 60 guys trying out that year. I had to be the worst player. There were a lot of really good players cut from the team. I made the team. I actually started every game. I went in for the jump balls. We got the first possession, and I came out for the rest of the game. That was my junior high school career. But the coach called me into his office a couple of weeks after I made the team, and he sat me down, and he said, if you want to be a really good player, you've got a lot of work to do. He said, but if you're willing to come in 1 hour before, and after we practice for 2 hours, just come 1 hour after, I'll work with you. And I was like shocked that this man who barely knew me would take that time. And I wanted to know why. I didn't ask him why, but he told me, he says, son, I see potential in you. I see potential in you you don't even see in yourself. And that, making the team was big, but that meeting in his office changed my life entirely. And it still does today. Because when I met my wife, Cindy, who you've met, from Richfield, Utah, everybody seems to know where that is. I didn't know where it was. I had to drive down there to take her out to dinner, and I couldn't get in the house because her parents shut the door in my face because they didn't want her dating a black guy. That was painful. That was pain. Not painful for me, but for her, it was like, it was so devastating that I wasn't sure that she was going to recover, but it was kind of a blessing because I had questions, she had questions. Her parents didn't want us to be together, so it brought us closer together to find out more about each other, to see if this thing could work, to see if I could convince her parents. And Derrick, not to go off on a tangent here, but when her parents didn't want her to see me, the first thing I thought in my mind was, aren't they Jazz fans? Right? It was like, couldn't that get me into the door? But it didn't. And the parallel with the basketball life and my spiritual life and my journey to my truth came in a lot of ways. It came in getting to know a young lady who was raised in the Church, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and getting to know what she stood for and her morals and her standards taught me a lot. I fell in love with her. And for some odd reason, she saw potential in me. And for most people, it wouldn't work because we were from two different sides of the track. We were different color, different religion. But where I see that those journeys connecting is, again, Jesus Christ in the center. I know he knows I have potential. And the choices that we make, the things that we do, the tools that we use, mine was basketball. It takes us to these places where we find out more about ourselves and we find out more about other people. Now the in-law story ends really well. I ended up marrying, so we've been married for over 32 years now, and 3 beautiful kids and some grandkids. And but it just, it's a continuous journey, isn't it? I mean, it's something that I think I'm tested on, and we're all tested on our faith all the time. And in our marriages, in our relationships with our kids, and all these things that we've been talking about, the never quit attitude, the things you have to find to be the best at your role in what you do, whether it's small forward with the Jazz or power forward in college, or a husband or a boyfriend who is falling in love with someone who is totally out of everybody else's realm. Christ is the center of all that, and somehow it always comes back to him. And somehow when it feels like it's falling apart, we have to consciously bring it back to him. And I think that's where, in my life, that's where all those things kind of fit together. I know that my championship's not a fluke. Yeah, you got to have some luck, but you've got to believe. And I think that was God an NC State fan? Maybe that day he was. But yeah, I mean, it's all relative to me. Whether it's the sports, whether it's my life as a husband and father, and my journey as hopefully one God's chosen.
Yeah. Well, in that you are, as I hear about the choices that you've made, going to church, raising your hand, looking up to those people on the front or 2 rows, known as sometimes as the spiritual splash zone. 9th grade, saying, I'm not going to cut myself. I'm going to go try one more time. Staying at NC State, even after having this beloved coach, move on. Choosing to forgive and forget, and not only that, but to embrace your good father-in-law. And hoping this is not too personal. If it is, we'll cut it out. But having him be one of the first calls that you make after you decide to be baptized.
For sure.
And to ask this man, a good man, will you be the one to baptize me?
Yeah.
He says yes. He flies to the other side of the earth and participates in that moment.
Well, we had a good talk, didn't we? We were on.
I remember this, and it impacted me. And I think about what you're saying of joy is not. It wasn't found in cutting the net down. It was found in the journey all the way through 1993. Yeah. It wasn't found in the baptism in 95. It was the journey to 95, and it isn't found today in whatever pinnacle of achievement you have found, but it's been in the journey that has brought you there. And you've sung about this in your music. You've talked about it in your speaking. You've reflected it in your actions. Even one day, I remember you and I at a hotel, and you heard my son was in the car. He didn't come out with me.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that.
And you ran out and got him out of the minivan, this little maybe 8th grader at the time, and he didn't know what the heck was happening with a nearly a 7-foot tall black man coming to his car, trying to get in the car to get him in. But he talks about that today. And he tells his friends, Thurl Bailey's my friend. Why? Because of a choice, again, that was made in the middle of your journey and introducing it to his. And I feel like I've been taught so much by you, and I'm grateful. If you could leave our listeners, just in closing here, with one message about faith and resilience, which are two key attributes I feel are found in your life, what would that be?
That is a defining question. I think I would go in the direction of, one, knowing who I am and knowing your purpose. Sometimes it's hard for us to understand what our purpose is. I kind of had that epiphany when I was traveling from Lake Como to Lugano, Switzerland, and the Border Patrol person asked 3 questions. She wanted to know where I come from, what my purpose was for being there, and she wanted to know where I was headed, my destination. And on that particular day, those 3 questions, I heard them many times, but they just hit me in a different way, and especially the second one, because I've been running around in shorts and tank top, making really good money, winning championships, becoming high profile as an athlete, all these things that come with that. And it made me think, like, what am I doing with all this, right? Is it just for my own satisfaction, just for my bank account? And I realized that I couldn't really answer that question. What is my purpose? What is my purpose for being here? What am I supposed to be doing with all these gifts? Now, I worked hard for a lot of them, but I know that God gave me the opportunity to have these gifts and to try to achieve these things for a reason. So what's my purpose? And I sat there, Derrick, just thinking about it. I don't even think I made it to where I was supposed to be going that day, because it was just eating away at me, but that I needed a purpose. I needed to find, I didn't need to decide that day. But I think that question hit me that day in a way that it was and always has been top of mind. And I believe everybody has a purpose, and maybe not just one, but I think the central purpose of all of us is to serve, is to be of service. I mean, look at what's going on around us, bro. I mean, look at the things that are happening to us as mortals, as human beings, as people that live in this country. We can choose, right? We have a choice of what to do with what we've been given. We have a choice of how we treat people in our initial meeting. We have a choice to look past skin color and look to the heart. Everybody has a heart. We have a choice to react to certain things. And so I know how I choose to do those things. And maybe sometimes I get it wrong. But if I choose to err, if you will, on the side of my nature, if I choose to emulate a man that I loved since I was a kid, I know I can't be him. I know I will never be perfect. But if I'm conscious, if that's my center, then I'm going to have that giving and service culture, because that's what Jesus had. And so, I don't know. I don't expect everybody to be the same or act the same or make the same. I mean, that's kind of what kind of makes our world go round. But I look at a lot of the things that we're going through that can be solved just by sitting and talking and discussing. We may not agree, but we respect each other. We love each other. We try to figure it out. And so I guess what I would leave with is be purposeful, be service-oriented. And there's so many people out there like me at one point that are still searching, right? They're still on that journey. And I would just say to them, I don't know if people who are going to be listening to this are even prayers, and maybe they're not. But I really believe in my life, it starts with having that faith that we're not here for nothing. And so if we're all service-oriented, then we're going to be able to accomplish a lot through that. We're going to be able to at least sit down and talk about what can we do with what we have? Who can we help? My mom always told me, son, time will be your most valuable asset, but always take the time. And it's just a part of me. And it's nothing for me to run out to the band and talk to your son. It's not about me. It's about him at that moment. And so I'm not saying I'm perfect. You know, I stumble and fall as well. I sometimes approach things the wrong way. But I think the better part of me understands, based on what I've been taught and based on who I'm around and those who understand me and know the better part of me and know my potential, because I can always be better. But I think that's what I would leave people with. Let's serve each other, because that right there can cure a lot of what causes a lot that goes on in our world, in our society.
Well, thank you so very much for the wonderful teachings and learnings that you have shared with us today about choice, service, love of God and of our neighbor and of ourselves, to never give up, to keep pushing, to keep trying, to do it with a smile on our face and a bounce in our step as well. We're so grateful for this time together, and we're grateful for your involvement in music and the spoken word. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Derrick.